And welcome back. Now, the Railroad Association of South Africa say that there's misunderstanding of what President Cyril Ramaphosa said with regard to the privatization of some key routes of the South African rail system. The association says that involving the private sector, while the government assumes a neutral role but still maintains effective ownership, will open opportunities for all to be players in business and job creation. And revealing his recovery plan during the joint sitting of Parliament last week, President Cyril Ramaphosa said that government will promote private sector participation in rail, including granting third-party access to the core rail network and to revive non-utilized routes. Mesela Nhlapo is the Chief Executive of the Railroad Association of South Africa, and Jack Mazibuko is General Secretary of the African Transport and Allied Workers Union, SATAWU, and they both join us now to give us their points of view on this. Thanks so much to both of you. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning.
So, Ms.
Thank
Nhlapo,
you very much for having SATAWU.
Absolute pleasure. Ms. Nhlapo, let me start with you. You say that there's misunderstanding with regard to what the president was actually proposing. So explain to us what it is exactly that you understand is going to happen here.
Good morning. What I understand and what the president's speech had said was that they encourage private sector participation and they will be granting third-party access into the main network, which is currently only have access to TFR, and TFR will be the only party that will grant access to private operator, deny or grant access. So for our members, and the private operators, when they get access to the network, it means that they're able to invest more into their operations, and they also be able to increase employment. And we are guaranteeing employment. We are not promising employment opportunities.
So part of the debate about this privatization issue is, of course, exactly which part of the rail service will be privatized. And there's also a feeling that this will be another disservice to the poor because who exactly is going to benefit? Those with money. So how do you then explain that?
Well, privatization, I think in this instance, the president or us as industry, we are not promoting a complete privatization, but rather your public-private partnerships. And I don't know who are the people with money. Mr. Mazibuko, the members that he has had over the years that were rather have gone through, say, PRASA or Transnet, that were members of SATAWU, have gone into business, are now private operators. Surely at some point, when you're trying to change the landscape of the South African rail sector, there are black-owned companies, black women-owned companies that will appreciate very much a certain level of privatization in the rail space in order to increase the efficiency of the rail sector. Let me give you another example. Many years ago, the grain market, 84% of the grain market was transported by rail. Now it's transported by road. Don't we want to have a move of freight from road to rail? And if we are talking about privatization of the passenger rail, what is it exactly that is going to be privatized? Is it the hardcore infrastructure, or is it the services that is offered to the poor of the poor? Now, do we want to offer the millions of passengers in this country transport that they travel safely to their destination and be able to get to work on time? Or what is it that we want and so? But what we are proposing is that we don't want to privatize, but we're rather talking about private-public partnerships.
Mr. Mazibuko, let me bring you in with regard to your view as SATAWU on this proposal and a response to what Ms. Nhlapo has just said.
No, thank you very much. I think from SATAWU's side, we are very much disappointed because history has the way of repeating itself. If you recall why Minister Khatebe was still a Minister of Transport, the government came to this kind of a proposal to to privatize the rail sector, and as the union, we have opposed that. Now we see this thing happening again under the leadership of President Ramaphosa, and then what the union position is that we'll oppose this thing. However, we are in support of a safe and reliable transport that will accommodate the poor and the working class. We are not in support of any privatization. For instance, if you look at PRASA, if we make an example, the challenges of PRASA is not about, it's all about the poor management of the people who were deployed there to run this entity. So we strongly believe that the energy need to be channeled there in making sure that the people that are appointed there in a form of a board members in a form of the CEO are people who are well skilled, who are qualifying to do the work, other than opting to an easy way out of privatizing these entities. Of course, if you privatize, you are correct to say this will benefit those who have money. The poor of the poorest are not going to benefit in the whole process. Hence, we are opposing it.
Ms. Nhlapo says, though, that the poor of the poor, whom you say you are speaking, in favor of, they, at the moment, are not reaping the benefits of the state-owned entity and the service that is being delivered because they are not safe. The infrastructure has been run down. Trains are always running late anyway. So how are the poor benefiting right now?
That's why we are saying let's look at the reasons that necessitated to the current situation that we find ourselves in before we can say the poor are not benefiting. From years back, the poor were benefiting, the working class were benefiting. And when you talk about the poor of the poorest, we are talking about the working class who are working day by day in making sure that these companies generate a profit. And now they are the ones who will be affected negatively. Once you invite a private sector in the whole thing, it will change even the prices of the trains that these people, the workers need to use, the poor of the poorest need to use to transport them from back and forth. So we don't support that at all. Let me put another example. Let's look at the SAA now. The SAA now is in tatters. The government is unable to assist SAA despite the fact that the business rescue practitioners have come up with a proposal. They are talking about equity partners. It's very difficult. Amongst the working class, no one will be benefiting those states that will be at place.
So, Ms. Nhlapo, let me come back to you. Is the assumption on your part that this optimal service can only be delivered once there is a private partner involved in this particular service? Are you saying that government is wholly incapable of rendering an efficient rail service?
Government it's capable. Government needs help. Traditionally, government, private sector has always been part of the rail sector. And I just want to bring it back a bit to explain perhaps that, rail is not BRASA. And I think that we need to start there. In terms of railway safety regulator, who's the body, the regulator that grant permits, they have over 200 operators. And largely the high percentage of those operators are private operators that employ the masses of this country. But there's also the freight market. To access the network, you have to ask Transnet for permission to access the market. Give you an example that Mr. Mazibuko has mentioned, SAA. So you and I can drive on the N1 and N3, and we don't have to ask government on a daily basis to access the network. But when it comes to the railway sector, each and every of these companies that are private operators, they need to get permission from Transnet. And sometimes this permission is granted, sometimes it's not granted. And the fees thereof that are connected with the access to the network, they are not being, let's say that Transnet is an operator, and at the same time, they are the ones that control access into the network. So there is a level of, there's an opportunity for South African companies, there's an opportunity for even unions to invest in those type of schemes where they will be able to generate cash for themselves. I mean, we know that unions, they do have investment arms and all that. All we're saying that here's an opportunity. Whether government is capable or incapable, the history I'm not concerned with. As private sector, we want to employ. And further to that, we commit, we don't tell stories. Traction yesterday announced, the Traction Group has announced that they are committing, not pledging, we are committing 1.5 billion. And on top of that 1.5 billion, if we get granted access, we're going to increase employment in this country. Now, do we want to have a conversation of where the failures came up, or do we want to have to be a progressive society that things have gone wrong? Yes, we agree. We are not getting service that we're supposed to be getting service, the poor of the poor that are often referred to. What is it that we're going to do as a country to move this country forward? You have graduates on a yearly basis that needs to be employed. Who's going to train them and employ them? And as private sector, they say, here we are, we're putting our money on the table. We want to work as South Africans. We appreciate that things have gone wrong, but let's work forward. This thing of being historians is not going to benefit anyone. We can learn from the past, but let's move forward.
So what about the question of redress, Ms. Mazibuko? Let me understand, who exactly are you proposing is going to own which different elements? As you said, at the moment, Transnet enjoys a monopoly there with regards to the rail infrastructure in this country. So who is going to own different elements, such as the very same rail infrastructure that is currently owned by government? Who's going to do the maintenance and so on? Explain to us how you see this playing out.
No, look, let's start here first. Currently in the country, we are having a commission like a Zondo Commission, which, if you look at the revelations that are taking place there, the main role players there who have collapsed the economy, who have collapsed the state resources, is the same private sector. And unfortunately, this is the honest truth that we cannot run away from it. So we are saying the government is capable to create sustainable jobs that will benefit the poor of the poorest and the working class. Secondly, let me make an example here. There was a company within Transnet by the name of Green Road. That company, it was employing more than 3,000 workers, manufacturing the locomotive. As we speak now, the company has collapsed. Majority of the workers have lost the job. So we are skeptical of the fact that the private sector can play a pivotal role under the state-owned institution to create jobs. We strongly believe that the state is capable to create jobs, and the state is capable to create sustainable jobs. That's what we are supporting. The question of workers will be benefiting, it's fine, unless if we change the modality. When we talk about the beneficiary of workers, let's rather talk about the establishment of cooperatives. Maybe that's where we can say workers will benefit, but at no stage where workers will benefit under the middleman.
Ms. Nhlapo, that same question to you as well, and also if you can address the concerns of the possibility of exorbitant private sector ticket pricing, especially in the face of escalating poverty in South Africa.
Traditionally, the rail infrastructure, it continues to be owned by the state. So where private sector comes in, it is on the operations. And in the world, there is, at least as far as I know, passenger rail is not a profitable business. It is mostly subsidized by the state. You can go anywhere else in the world, it's mostly subsidized by the state. So there will always be an element of government in it that will subsidize where it might be considered termed maybe expensive for the poor that are being referred to. But what I know is this. We keep on referring to what has happened to the past. At what point, as South Africans, are going to start working to the future? And let me support my statement. And I want to bring it down to the CFTA that will say that we want to increase intra-Africa trade. We have a huge industry in South Africa. At what point are we going to revive the industrialization of this country? And I want to put it to Mr. Mazibuko. Mr. Mazibuko, we want to employ your members. No, they don't have to stay with the government forever. They've got skills that they've earned. We have so much respect for them. We actually think that they will add value, not in this country, on the region, and towards the continent. We believe that the industrialization and the development of this continent will rely on the potential of Africans, particularly its women and youth. We are not excluding anyone. We are an inclusive society. We want to work with labor to address the issues of this country. And I'm extending my hand to you. We may be missing each other somewhere. I'm saying that as labor and private sector, let's work together. We meet around the table to discuss wages, July. Why are we not sitting around the table to discuss this particular issue? We will disagree, but we will find a common ground for the best interest of this country.
And that is the $1 million issue. That's the crux of the matter in terms of who benefits how through this privatization. And Ms. Mazibuko, you keep saying that we shouldn't look to the past, but equally we cannot be ahistoric, because history teaches us that many projects that in the past were intended to benefit ordinary South Africans didn't work because of looting, because of corruptions, because of how things just went wrong, as Mr. Mazibuko also points out, where companies have collapsed. So we can't exactly turn a blind eye to that and pretend these things didn't happen. But let me give each of you a minute to just wrap it up and tell us your view on what the way forward is. Mr. Mazibuko, let me start with you.
No, thank you very much. I think SATAWU position is very clear. We are opposing to any form of privatization in a rail sector in general. And then I think we base our argument based on the history, and we can mention a number of entities, state-owned entities that were privatized before. For instance, let's look at Telkom today. Telkom was once a state-owned, government was 100% shareholder in Telkom. Look at where is Telkom today. Telkom is in a verge of collapsing. You look at the number of SATAWU, your ESCOM, and so on and so on. We cannot allow a privatization. We think a state has capacity to create a decent job and sustainable job. What we need to do, we need to make sure that the people that are deployed there to run these entities in a form of a board and the CEOs are people who are capable, people who are qualifying to do the job. So we are not in support of any privatization. Thank you.
Ms. Nhlapo, your final word?
My final word is that as private sector, we're reaching out to all stakeholders that let's hold hands, let's work together for the benefit of our country, for the benefit of the poor, for the benefit of the young child that is still growing up. We need to build this country. We are not saying that we don't acknowledge the wrong that has been done in the past. That's why we have a Zondo Commission. Let Zondo Commission deal with those matters. But in the meantime, there is bread that needs to be bought. There is a child that needs to have school shoes. And we are saying that one company, I'm saying I'm putting 1.5 billion on the table today. That's my offer. As private sector, from one company from yesterday, I'm saying I'm putting my money on the table. And the unions, I'm saying to the unions, come to the table. I want to work with you. Pulling different direction will not benefit this country. I'm inviting you. Let's talk.
Well, that's where we're going to have to leave it. Ms. Mesela Nhlapo, Chief Executive of the Railroad Association of South Africa, and Jack Mazibuko, General Secretary of the African Transport and Allied Workers Union, for discussing their perspectives on whether the privatization of the country's rail infrastructure will be beneficial for all, especially the poor. And that's where we're going to have to leave it with our SABC 2 viewers.